minimalism, the word trend sounds like a dirty word, because I think when we all think of trending, we think of something that is then going to be untrending. I discussed a few weeks ago how in 2017 on the internet, minimalism became quite a big trend, perhaps because of the Marie Kondo thing, who can say. However, for most of us, minimalism has been around much longer. We may have been doing it much longer, but the other day I couldn't help but notice that there is actually what appears to be a trend on short reel platforms, i.e. even here on YouTube Shorts, on Instagram and on TikTok. Now, YouTube will always be my favourite of all those platforms. I think it's the place where people, I hope, are a little bit more balanced about the consumption of this type of content. But I'm going to tell you what it was, which for me feels just like a rebranding, which is very appropriate for the time and age that we're living in now, of minimalism. What it is called is what you probably saw in the title of this video, or words to that effect. It is called Underconsumption Core. Now, I've watched a few of these reels because I was thinking, isn't that just minimalism that they're talking about? But if there's one thing I've noticed that people seem to like to do, it's been something throughout the history of time in etymology, which is the study of how language evolves. Things sometimes are renamed, perhaps by the younger generation that thinks something better explains what something is about. For instance, I'm not even going to argue with this, even though I don't really like the ring of underconsumption core as much as minimalism. Minimalism, although those of us in it may know it is about minimizing in every aspect of our lives, not just decluttering, I do get people sometimes asking me, minimalism, what's that? And because the name doesn't seem to ring a bell for them of what it's really about. Whereas underconsumption core, perhaps it does. And I feel that this new naming of underconsumption core, I'm going to give you a few examples in a minute, it perhaps does explain to people a little bit more what it's about. And I really feel like it's actually a pushback from all the overconsumption that we have been seeing on platforms like TikTok that perhaps are a reflection on our real life. But we do have to also remember that sometimes, especially for me as a video creator, there is a separation between online life and real life. For instance, I do make videos about minimalism, about decluttering. Whenever I'm still on my decluttering path, I will still show you things, although that, as I've discussed, will reach a place of a natural end where then I will perhaps go and help people I know also minimize and declutter their lives, but also give them the tools of letting go in other areas of their life as well. So obviously minimalism is definitely not just about that. And I'd like to think even in this new underconsumption core, it's been hinted at that it's about letting go of other things as well, especially the idea of consumption and consumerism. So the separation that I'm talking about is, for instance, I myself, in my private life, in my personal life, in my work life, I have other things going on that are not minimalist related. But since I have created this minimalist channel, it of course is going to be the topic that I always talk about. And it's so lovely to hear that that is very, very helpful to a lot of you. And that is my aim. Ultimately, I am aiming to be helpful, to be informative, but as someone who is also a video creator, so that is not all what I'm about to do with just minimalism. This is why I like to experiment with my videos, do different things, shoot from different angles, be amusing sometimes, because I think it's nice to be more than one thing at once. I can be entertaining and creative and experimental and a video creator at the same time as being a minimalist. Otherwise, I feel like we are just minimizing the content as well, you know, the video creation. Even if a video creator's aim is just to talk about minimalism and educate, I, as a video creator, and I think we should be accepting of all of the creators, also like to be creative. So that aside, the reason I'm discussing this is because I know that as soon as I mention things like TikTok, people seem to think that that platform is a little bit silly and there isn't much education purposes there, and in that I would agree. But what I'm actually enjoying about this new trend on TikTok is it is actually attempting to educate some of the TikTok users that do these huge reels of consumption, overconsumption, rather than conscious consumerism. It's attempting to educate that you do not have to be like that. It's creating waste, it's creating your own poverty for some people, and it's just not good. It's definitely not good for the environment. So what is Underconsumption Core? It is a pushback against all the consumption, and what I'm seeing is short reels. I'm hoping I might be the first to actually cover it in long form content here on YouTube, which allows for a little bit more description as well. It is about, yes, decluttering, but also not buying more to have to declutter at a later date, which is what a lot of people get caught in the cycle of. It's about finding ways to not buy new, finding ways like I have done in minimalism, but it's now getting called Underconsumption Core, to when, you know, as human beings, especially perhaps artistic, creative human beings, we may get slightly bored of our possessions before they have worn out. And I'm just being a realist here, because some of us do get bored of our possessions before they wear out. Finding ways to customize them and change them in some way, rather than always buying new and consuming, because we're attempting to underconsume, just like in minimalism. So for instance, my white Buddha in the background, as many of you know, it wasn't always white. It used to be sage green, and I sprayed it because I wanted to change up the setting a little bit, especially when I changed all the room to white, which was largely just to reflect light out of what is otherwise quite a dark room. So I did that instead of buying new. I almost decluttered a pink fleece because I didn't really like the colour. I didn't know if it was quite me. Despite some people saying it suited me, I didn't know how I felt about that. Like, was it a slight different shade of pink that I didn't actually like in hindsight, preferring perhaps coral and earthy tones? So I had a go at dyeing it green. Some of you have perhaps seen it in some of the other videos. It's making little changes to cut consumption wherever you can. You know, doing up pieces of furniture, thrifting bits of furniture from your local store, and even then, not necessarily being in the cycle of that either. Keeping things as long as they are useful. One big area that I think it's really helped on TikTok is trying to unnormalize the idea that you need 5 lipsticks, 5 eyeshadows, 5 foundations, 5 lip glosses. You know, how much do you really need? You can only use one at once. For an example as well, people in the Underconsumption Core videos talk about not just wear per item, which obviously we discussed should be around 120, but it's becoming less and less, but also realizing for some stuff you don't need more than one thing. You don't need a kitchen appliance that does everything, because often some of the kitchen appliances will do more than one thing. You don't need them to do isolated jobs. We bought this second-hand sofa in our previous place about 6 years ago. It was second-hand then. You know, it's not perfect. It's got the odd mark on it now that won't come out. It's even started to rip at the back of one of the cushions, but because that can just be tucked down the back, I'm not about to run out and replace it. This sofa will be walking out on its own before I declutter it. So in underconsumption, it seems to be also about being frugal, but not wanting to consume while ever something will still do its job and is fit for purpose. It's all of a sudden looking very dark in my kitchen. Let me turn the light on. So, let's talk about some other factors about the Underconsumption Core / minimalism that's starting to be discussed wider, and perhaps by the younger generations like Gen Alpha that weren't really that interested in that because they've been brought up on watching these reels about overconsumption, which is highly worrying. So it's actually a great thing if this underconsumption core is trending. Now we would hope that it doesn't not become a trend, but like with everything that perhaps is called a trend, it means it will eventually become not a trend. But what I like to think is, at least it's a converse reaction to overconsumption, and maybe a balance somewhere in the middle will come from it. Personally, I prefer this end of the spectrum, but you get what I am saying, that it's teaching perhaps some of the younger generation that are watching these videos, sort of, you know, in the early teenage years, that this isn't quite right and there are repercussions and consequences because of this, and that is, if you do this, you won't have them. Within this field of underconsumption, people are also talking about that it's not a choice for some people, and that is rightly so, and we often talk about that in minimalism as well, that for some people that are below the poverty line, on low income, it's just a way of life. It's not something they're attempting to do. So it is a privilege if you are optionally choosing it. That is also a whole other thing. But it's people that are making intentional decisions as well to not overconsume and in fact underconsume. Now, like with everything, there are obviously extremes, as we were well aware of on this channel and some other minimalist channels. But I like to sometimes talk about where it is okay to consume, because as many other minimalist channels have discussed, there can sometimes be a dark side to consumption and minimalism, and that I would argue that that is when people that I have heard other minimalists say, I think actually I saw in one, is it Ashleen Eaton, how you pronounce her name? She once discussed how she went to a second-hand market, so it was only second-hand, and she really wanted to thrift this leather jacket, and she was genuinely scared of getting this leather jacket, vegan leather, let me just put that out there, I think she said vegan leather. And she was worried because as somebody who is a creator online, she was worried she would be judged for buying something new when she's supposed to be all about the decluttering and minimizing and keeping a home calm, minimal, but also not over consuming. Now, I think many of us would be balanced with our reaction there and think for her, wow, let yourself have that jacket, you know, you do shop intentionally, you do minimize intentionally, you're not an overconsumer. So very, very occasionally, if you see something that really does set your soul on fire in terms of physical stuff, by all means get it. We shouldn't ever feel that we can't get something if we want to. For instance, as extreme as I may be to some people here in my home, on my channel, I will occasionally accept a gift that is given, I'll enjoy it for a while, I've got hair in my mouth, and sometimes I will keep it for a long time and it becomes perhaps my new thing that I want. Sometimes I allow it to be extra and sometimes I declutter something else in its place, but we don't have to do that. We can occasionally keep the extra item if we want without doing the one in, one out rule. And that's what she said she felt under pressure to do. Either do the one in, one out rule, explain it, and we don't have to. We're not answerable to anybody, and the main thing is that we feel like we are being intentional with our lifestyle. For instance, I'm gonna discuss something that you will all see on Thursday's video. Guys, I have bought the robot Hoover because it just seemed fitting on so many levels for our needs in this home. I thought in my mind for a long time about this because I thought I shouldn't consume, I shouldn't really buy that, my other Hoover still works. But in the end, I've had it in a list of what I might possibly want, and this is how I do this to cut down my consumption, to see how much I really want it and whether I still think it's relevant in 6 months' time. And it really has been lately because of the set of circumstances. So if I begin to not occasionally buy the things that I want because I'm more worried about what people will say, it definitely becomes unbalanced, not me doing what is right for me. And that feels wrong on an intentional level. So I began to say to myself, well, actually, all these parameters feel right. The reason you didn't get the robot hoover was because you had a very big pile rug. All the rugs in your home have gone. I don't know why I keep counting on my hands even. So I said to myself, that's gone. You hate how where you used to store the previous Dyson behind the sofa in the corner, it would stick out of the back when you were visually looking at it, and it really felt like visual noise to me. So I really wish there was some smaller hoover out there on the market that could be stored out of the way. And as we have no storage in our home, there just wasn't anywhere, there wasn't a hoover that was small enough and there was nowhere to store it. Then I thought, what annoys me more is getting that hoover out every day, wasting time, what feels like wasting time to myself, hoovering every day, but then it not being strong enough anyway, and me still having to go around with the little dustpan on my hands and pick up the big bits that the suction wasn't strong enough on. So guys, I got a robot hoover, and I will probably do a little demonstration of how easy even smart controlled with your voice in next week's video, or Thursday's video I should say, because as a minimalist I do enjoy technology. I do enjoy doing some things from scratch, like in simple living and slowing down, but for some things, perhaps things that I don't enjoy doing, I enjoy the convenience of them. And I think that is partly why technology and new inventions exist and are constantly being invented to, in some respects, save us time and make our life easier. And what is more easy than saving time and convenience? It means you've got more time to do other things that you want, perhaps like make YouTube videos. So I did get this small hoover, and initially I thought, should I feel guilty about this? And I thought, I'm not going to feel guilty because it is right for what we want to do in our home. I want to be able to set Randy off, that's his name, Randy the robot, and get him, I hope he's not listening, he better not start. So I wanted to be able to set him off to hoover the apartment while I'm getting on with doing other things. He's small, he's white, he blends into the background, he doesn't take up much space, he can even get under our sofa, which was a little bit of a task with the previous stick vacuum. Even though you could get a bit in, it wasn't ideal. The back of the hoover, the back of the sofa, that corner, it never got cleaned. And as a result of having Randy, it's made me realise that we need everything where we can off the floor, which has actually had the effect of making the home look even more minimal and organised. What I'm getting at is obviously knowing when, like with everything, you sort of could do with and should, and I hate to use that word, find a balance with consumption. And I'm loving the Underconsumption Core, but let's not take that quite to an extreme of thinking, for instance, we can't buy a pair of socks that has 6 holes in it, because that is bordering on ridiculous. You know, we need to find a balance. And like I learned even doing my living with 14 items for 30 days, to look at how some people take it to the super extreme with minimalism, I did that for myself, also for entertainment, also as a learning practice for others to watch, not just entertainment, to show when perhaps it could be too ridiculous, but when it's appropriate. For instance, it was definitely appropriate for Peace Pilgrim walking across America, not wanting to carry anything. I've discussed how it might be appropriate for me when I'm traveling, because we've had experience in the past when we were traveling when even a backpack of sort of 5 to 10 litres not 5, maybe more like 10, but a small backpack felt like too much. You know, the straps hurt our shoulders and back, they like rubbed. It made our back sweaty in the middle of summer. So that is when perhaps living with 14 items in a bum bag would be appropriate. But personally for myself, I felt that was too extreme, you know, on a day-to-day realistic lifestyle. So I'm always about doing things to experiment and question myself, to learn the bigger picture of what is the balance, what is the yin-yang, what is the Taoist way, which is something I definitely lean towards. And now that I am sort of accepting the end of my decluttering journey and how we may just leave our apartment now, perhaps if we sublet, and only if we do eventually move from this home, then think about what we're going to do with our stuff, as this seems to be now the baseline of things that we are comfortable living with. Because I've now accomplished what I think is, you know, a very minimal, calm space that obviously we all have to keep on top of as well, and not constantly buy loads of things to have to declutter. It has actually made me realise that I do want to start doing more mindful videos, more definitely about some of the practices I take from Taoism, although I would largely just class myself as a mindful, intentional, spiritual person rather than following any set religion. I'm going to do more of that, and to occasionally do some of the home organisation and decluttering. I am going to visit friends' homes and help them with that, so you'll still get to see sort of minimalist decluttering videos as well. And we're going to mix that up because it's something that I enjoy doing. You know, there has to be a point when we accept that we ourselves can really no longer declutter on a regular basis, and it will just be as things wear out, or as something becomes more fitting for our lifestyle, like the robot Hoover, and not feeling guilty about that. So to summarise, today we've been discussing the Underconsumption Core that is trending on Shorts, on TikTok, on Instagram Reels, and really how it is perhaps just the rebranded etymological evolution of minimalism. Now, quite frankly, I don't care what they call it, as long as it is about underconsumption, which is ultimately going to help people, help the planet, help the cause of environmentalism, and just in general be better. Call it what you want. I believe it's practically minimalism rebranded, and I feel quite pleased that I've perhaps been the first one to cover this in long form content within the minimalist community. I think I saw one other girl do a podcast about it who is just a general podcaster in long form content, but it's hard to be original in a world of video creation and online content that is constantly one area that is recycled, that perhaps sometimes gets a bit boring when it's recycled. My ultimate aim as a creator is, as well as making helpful content and as well as being creative, it's to try and be as original as possible. So when you come to my channel, it may not be the typical minimalist channel, which might not be for everybody, but for those of you who are here and constantly support me by liking and commenting, I am very, very grateful, because at the end of the day I'm trying to be a video creator as well as a minimalist. Minimalism is not just who I am. I don't want to be reductive about that. So whilst the algorithm favours me constantly making minimalist content here on this channel, I like to do what I can with the confines of that content in terms of experimenting with my video styles. So on the fourth wall level of minimalist videos that we consume, let's not be reductive with the kinds of styles that we consume or that we're willing to consume, because I think it's good to have things presented in different ways and not simply recycled content. I think it's nice to have original ideas and original content. And the thing is, nobody is going to suffer from original content I would just wish, this is a hope to any other creators that are watching some of the videos, please give smaller channels that have gone to the effort of coming up with original and creative ideas, please give them credit for their effort when, you know, there's a little bit of a tweak of a thumbnail there that perhaps is highly coincidental, if not plagiarized, or give them credit for that idea that you saw that you liked. I agree, there is an element of being inspired and influenced, but when you know in your heart that you have taken that from a smaller creator, you're not going to get less views by mentioning where you got that idea, that concept, that thumbnail, that style, that transition from. So let's be generous in the minimalist community, because it feels a little bit hypocritical to be going on about being generous and letting go of your stuff and giving to charity here and letting that thing go for under $20 here, when we can't even give a mention to another channel because we're still in a competitive mindset. I absolutely love to mention where people have given me ideas, because just because they've given you an idea, it takes nothing away from you, but it does take something away from them. People are still going to watch your video, people are still perhaps going to watch their video. Everyone can then be happy, unless you're actually wanting people to think the idea is yours. If the idea is yours, great. Otherwise, go out and be original yourself and get your own ideas. I just had to say that because I think there is this also within minimalism. One last point, even though this may be away from the underconsumption topic, I think there is this toxic positivity element that people think we always have to be positive, but that could sometimes leave you getting, you know, walked all over. And I think sometimes there is still a right time to stand up for what you believe in and have a voice, and say sometimes when some things perhaps do annoy you a little bit. I'll leave it at that. I hope you've all enjoyed this video about underconsumption, underconsumption core, which really, I believe, equals minimalism. See you all on Thursday for the home tour. Bye. In minimalism, do I need to shut that window because of the seagulls? Yes. So to summarise, today we have been discussion? Sorry guys, I was just feeding Pedro and Penelope. They were waiting for me at the window. Pigeons, right.